Hello, everyone, and welcome. Today's conversation is about what happens when life doesn't go according to plan, when the identity you've built begins to crumble, and when the path ahead disappears, and when you're forced to discover who you are beneath everything you've relied on to define yourself. My guest today is Sarah Farina, transformational coach, author, and one of the contributing authors in our upcoming book, The Way of the Initiate: Stories of Remembering, Awakening, and Becoming the New Human. After experiencing the collapse of significant areas of her personal life, Sarah embarked on the Camino de Santiago, which I've always wanted to do, a pilgrimage that became far more than a physical journey. It became a path of healing, self discovery, and remembering who she was beneath the expectations, roles, and stories she'd carried for years. In this conversation, we explore transformation, resilience, flourishing after collapse, the Camino as a living metaphor for awakening, and what it means to trust yourself when everything familiar falls away. Sarah, welcome to High on Life.
Thanks, Melissa. I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to have this conversation. I am an avid trekker. I have trekked to some of the coolest places in the world, yet the Camino is not one that I have done yet. And I think it's more than a trek, it is a pilgrimage. But before we get into the Camino, I'd love to know what was happening in your life that ultimately led you to that journey.
Yeah, well, it actually was an interesting thing because I was an avid trekker too, and I've traveled to a lot of places in the world and hiked all kinds of places. And that point in my life, though, I actually was barely able to walk. I'd been walking with a cane. I had some really serious knee problems and was essentially not going anywhere anymore. And I was super depressed.
Mm.
And basically, what happened for me is I had always wanted to do the Camino, and then I did a treatment that really just took the edge off. It didn't fix anything, but I was sort of able to hobble along and I just booked the trip. I normally plan everything and kind of have these decision-making processes and I just felt like, you know what, my life had closed down so much that I
Mm.
just wanted to do it and I wanted to have that experience. I knew it wouldn't be the same as maybe the other people who could just sort of walk like normal, but it was so important to me to be there and I'm so glad I did. It really was life-changing.
Wow, so you had a physical condition going on and you just said, no plan, I'm just doing it. That's two really bold things to go on a pilgrimage like this. And were you looking at the Camino as a pilgrimage, or did you just look at it as I gotta physically do this thing because I'm a trucker?
No, I really wanted it as a pilgrimage. I'd always heard about that idea of the journey, and that really called to me. And I didn't know what it meant. I just had this sense that I had to do it. And
Mm-hmm.
I did find that there was something about being there that you could feel the intentionality of it. So,
Mm.
walking on that path, you actually are walking the path of thousands of people or thousands of years of people going on a pilgrimage. So I had my own issues, and so did everybody. That was the interesting thing. I could feel as down as I was about how hard it was for me to physically move, but everybody there was carrying something, and I felt like there was an energy on the path, even though I didn't have a lot of communication with other people because I was mostly alone and in quite remote areas, and I couldn't keep up with others. But I felt it, and I had that intention not only in myself, but I actually feel like the path held that as well.
Wow, that's really beautiful. That there's an energetics that shows up when you say yes to this next thing in your life. So you did this completely all alone. Oh, yeah. Okay, so is this the story? Are you sharing about this in the book? Is this the story that you're sharing in The Way of the Initiate?
Yeah, I do mention it, and I actually
Mhm.
had written a memoir about that. So I just recently finished it, and I will be coming out at some point as soon as I can figure out the publishing. But it was really a story that was powerful for me, so I wanted to share it with others.
Yeah. So what was your intention, since you said this was a pilgrimage for you? What was your intention as you set off for the Camino?
I just felt like my life had no more meaning. I basically couldn't do most things anymore. My social life had really changed because I couldn't sort of keep up. And I had thrown myself into work, which was great, but exhausting. And I just felt like I didn't know myself anymore. I had no more sense of purpose. And so I just wanted to find out. So it was as simple as that. I didn't know the answer. I barely knew the questions. I just
Hmm.
knew I had to go through that process.
Well, I think you're speaking to a lot of people in our audience right now and in the world because, I was recently reading an article and it was talking about the meaning crisis, that the world is having a crisis of meaning, and that compared to like 1990, that we're it's 5 times more likely to not know to feel like I have no meaning in life. Like, what am I doing? Like, arriving here and have done all of the things, I've followed all the rules I was told, I did all the things I was supposed to, and all of a sudden, what was it all for? Like, what am I doing? And so you had this same thing going on, and you're like, no, I'm gonna go do something about it. I'm gonna go I'm gonna go walk the Camino.
Yeah, and it's interesting. There was a place called, or is a place called Finisterre, which means end of the earth, and it's actually at the past the end of the Camino. So you finish the Camino, and then some people carry on walking. I was done at that point, but I wanted to go to this place because in my imagination, it was so important to go to a place where people at that time, when they called it end of the earth, didn't envision another world, right? So I come from, what we now call the New World, even though, of course, there were people here at the time, but it wasn't in my ancestors' imagination. And so for me, it was really important to connect with a place and the idea that you can look out at the sea and not see anything, but it doesn't mean there isn't anything there. And so I kind of got obsessed with that and understanding what came next after the point of my imagination ending.
Mm-hmm. And what came next?
Well, I basically realized that walking was horrible for me. I mean, walking was so important to me my whole life. It took me to so many places. I had traveled a lot, so it really enabled me to explore places, get to know people. In my world, because it had closed in so much, I kind of felt like I couldn't do anything. But the Camino just reminded me that I'm just stubbornly sticking to this one thing I can't do, but I wasn't open to other possibilities. And so I came back and I started to explore what can I do? And I started to enlarge my world again. And I really sincerely found a place of joy in myself. And I started to connect with others. And it really did change a lot for me in terms of not only remembering who I am and that I don't have to sort of hold myself back because of other limitations, but that there's a bigger world and a bigger experience that we can have.
Mm, yeah. And so, how did your life change after coming back from the Camino?
Basically, I just found a lot of new hobbies. So at that point, I really came into a time of being in the water. So it was really important for me I started swimming. I had always loved being in the water, but I now swim became a way of having my full range of motion, of being in movement, being held. And actually, I've just started last year now doing open water swimming. So it's this incredibly beautiful experience where you are held in the earth, in the water. You look out, you're fully in nature, and you just feel not only fully alive, but fully part of the bigger picture. So
Mm,
for me, it's been absolutely an incredible experience and what it's led me to. And that's so much bigger than what I even knew before.
yeah. What do you think was the biggest lesson or the thing that came from the Camino for you? What did it teach you about yourself?
I think it just taught me that I knew what I knew and I just kind of stopped being creative. I got stuck. And so the Camino just reminded me there are so many different ways to live life. And so I had always been a creative person, but I started writing. I started first actually putting writing prompts on social media. I started this thing called Word Garden where I would just put prompts because I just missed my writing group and it was just for me. But then I started doing workshops and then I started writing more and then ended up writing this book. And it just all kind of gave me this outlet for things that were tapping into my own creativity, but connecting also with bigger themes and meeting people also through that.
Oh, so writing and water. I love that. The two W's. Like they came flourishing out of your life from this experience here, and you literally that's what you have. Your coaching work is called flourish. Yeah. Why that word?
I think it just represented why I was doing it. I actually didn't come into coaching on purpose. I had been over the years, and especially as I say, because I threw myself into work, moving into higher and higher levels of leadership and just finding that it was really hard. I had the technical skills, but there were all of these soft skills that really challenged me and that made it interesting and it pushed me, but it also made me want to learn. And I actually couldn't find a coach. So I had at that time said to myself, I'm going to become some kind of a leadership coach just to help people. It was sort of a side idea. But then I ended up having some really devastating personal things happen. And I actually decided to find a coaching program that would actually help me as much as train me. And so
Mm-hmm.
I started doing a transformational coaching certification. And that is where I really have to say I kind of drunk the Kool-Aid. I mean, I just couldn't believe how powerful it was. I
Yeah.
couldn't believe my own connection to myself and to others, to the energy of it all. And so I witnessed that transformation in others, but I also saw the energy that I was able to hold through it. So for me, the idea of flourishing is really about finding that essence, whatever it is in yourself, and giving that space to grow. So that's really what that means to me.
Yeah, I found transformational coaching in 2013. It was, that was when I took my training in that, and I felt the same way about it. Like it's transformational, right? It was literally one of those things. I was doing health coaching and holistic hormone therapy at the time, and I stumbled upon this when I was trying to figure out why my clients were having like these strange instantaneous healings and like what else was going on and what's energy and all that. And transformational coaching was like the first thing that I really stepped into, and I was like, oh wow, this is so powerful when you can see the transformation that can happen in your life. So you came into the coaching and the transformational coaching because you said you had some profound personal experiences and some things that were going on. Well, how did how did the transformational coaching help you to move through that, and like what happened in your own life that allowed you to like to really shift in that area?
Yeah, I mean, I just lost my confidence. I essentially lost my belief in the world. I lost my sort of sense of my own values because I'd always tried to be this sort of good and kind and compassionate person. And then that also then led me into some of the problems that I ended up in. And so I was really full of a lot of self-hate. And so the transformation allowed me to look inside of myself and find the things that really are still of value, things that I actually had been really blaming myself for, and sort of yeah, just reconnecting with those things. And then also the idea of surrender, because I was trying to surrender for a very long time. I worked on it. It was on my list. I did all
Yeah,
kinds of
yeah,
things.
it was the opposite. Trying to surrender.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. I couldn't
Right.
do it. I absolutely
Yep.
couldn't do it. I was trying my best, acceptance, surrender every day, and I couldn't do it. And so through that transformation, I actually finally got there. And I can't say there was one moment,
Yeah.
but it was extremely profound because I had to let go. There are things you can't control in life.
Hmm.
And I think all of the skills and the competencies and all of that that I used to sort of have and be able to use, they didn't work in this situation. And so it was just this process of letting go and saying, these are the things I think made me powerful, that made me good at what I did. And maybe they were in a certain setting and context, but not anymore.
Yeah.
And so that transformation really took me deep inside of myself. And also, it connected me to things much bigger than myself.
Hmm. So for people out there that are like, I'm going through this in my own life, maybe they're lost their confidence. They've had that collapse. They've had the pain in their lives, and they're like, I can't go to the Camino and walk my way to, stripping away and surrender and rediscovering myself. Do you, first off, is it possible? Like, can someone flourish after this type, when they have this type of profound loss and collapse? And like, what's the first step for someone that's in that kind of state?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I think the first thing is to be kind to yourself
Mm,
because I feel like when I was in that state and I'm working my way out of it, I can't claim perfection at this point, but I think if you're not kind to yourself, you can't expect it to come from outside of yourself. And so that's really the first step is just allowing yourself to be as you are, giving yourself that space. And then there are many other things, of course. I mean, I think I did all of them. There are lots of activities, but really just allowing yourself to be, allowing yourself, even when, and that's part of the shadow work that I did, but even when you're incredibly angry, when you're full of grief, when you don't think you can hold your own emotions, even in that, to find a way to be with it. Because my first instinct was to just repress all of that, to do my absolute best not to feel those things. And in this situation, it was too much. That actually wasn't possible anymore. And that's maybe part of what pushed me into that state of surrender because I just couldn't do it on my own. And so the other part of that, and this is speaking as somebody who's done everything by myself my whole life, super independent, there's this point where you just can't. And so having to ask for help, ask for support, tell people what you're going through, look for help. Those are also things that I think anybody can do. And I think it's, it sort of puts you in a really humbling position because especially if you're sort of that capable person, you're usually maybe the one that helps others. And so to actually say, hey, I'm not okay, that isn't self a step, right? And that's sort of your own process that you need to go through. And then, I mean, I still think journey as a metaphor is actually incredibly healing. So for me, for example, when I did the Camino, my life was sort of sad and depressing because I couldn't walk, but I was otherwise okay. And then some other things happened after that when I was in this beautiful state that actually brought me lower than I've ever been. And so the process for me was actually to walk the Camino again on the page. So
Ooh.
that's when I started writing and I started relearning and reliving those lessons. And it was a way for me to integrate those things.
Mm.
So I'm not saying everybody should write a story, but you can experience things in a way that's meaningful to you. So tapping into whatever your kind of creativity is that you're interested in. I was talking to a friend yesterday who's interested in dance. That can be a way to express things in your body. There are just so many ways, and I think just finding out what that is for you, and anyone can do that, is just figure out your own interests and get into a place where you can express your own creativity.
Yeah. Well, I love that you said I took the journey again. It was like I had done this journey and I took the journey again. So, like, walk us through, like, when you took the journey again, what did that feel like for you? Like, what did you notice? What else? Because since you had already done this once and now you're here doing it again, but on paper and in a different way, what were some of the, like, the ahas or the things that came up for you that you were like, oh, because I had the same thing happen. With the way of the initiate and my initiation, I had an experience in Egypt when I went through this initiation. But it wasn't until about 2 years later when I started sharing the stories and that I started. Oh, that's what that was. Oh, that's what that was. And I'm wondering if you had to kind of sign up a similar experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So people had told me after the Camino, oh, you should write about it because people are always interested. And I'd said, sure, and I just hadn't done it. And then when everything kind of collapsed in my own life, I had actually gone to a Reiki session. And I'll say her name because I cannot thank her enough. Daniela Fisher is the Reiki practitioner who I saw and who's the most sort of compassionate and powerful and an amazing person who just was there for me in that moment. And she, after the very first session, when I was just in a state of absolute collapse, she said to me, you need to write. And when she said that to me, I knew immediately why. I
Mm.
knew I had to write about the Camino. And so I started the next day. And it was interesting because I actually was very angry with the Camino. I had blamed it because after the Camino, I felt so good. I was just in such a state of trust with the universe and I felt so open. And then that's when much worse things happened. And I thought, oh, if I hadn't trusted, if I hadn't believed that life could be good, this wouldn't have happened. And
Mm.
so the book actually, I was a bit begrudging. I knew I had to write it, but I felt a bit, it wasn't sort of this cheerful process. But as I wrote it, I remembered everything again, why I did it, how excruciating it was. It wasn't fun. A lot of people love the Camino because they drink wine and eat good food and make friends. I mean, I just didn't do any of that. I was in excruciating pain most of the time, but I
Wow.
realized other things. And so for me, writing that again just brought me back to every single lesson and all the things that I had to face about myself, about life, about, everything being put into perspective. And so, yeah, the book actually really brought me to those lessons. But now that I was at a different place in my life, it gave them even more meaning.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just listening to you, I can see like resilience and persistence. I mean, most people that would embark on a journey like that, first off, wouldn't be injured, right? and would make a deep a plan, would probably go with some friends or whatever. And so this was like that. It's the hero's journey, that solo journey, and you're wounded. You're not even 100% yourself, and yet you had the fortitude and the resilience and to keep getting up every day. And that says something deep. I mean, that in itself is transformational work. Is what do you do when you get up every single day, even when you don't want to, even when you're in pain, even when you're at the worst that you could be, and you proceed on, knowing that knowing that there's this goal, this thing that you have in mind, that is so important. That's so important.
Yeah, and it's funny because I didn't really know why. I still knew it was important. I knew I had to
Yeah,
do it. I just
yeah,
couldn't figure out why. And there were most days, not even some days, where I
yeah.
thought I might not make it. I can remember one day because I did the longest of the Caminos, which also has its own story of why I selected that. But I was probably half or two-thirds of the way, something like that. And I was walking and I was almost finished for the day. I had, I think, 6 kilometers to go, but my leg just totally seized up. Like I couldn't move it at all. So I just kind of laid down on the path because I there was nowhere to sit, and I just sort of sat there. And I took a bunch of anti-inflammatories, and it started raining. And I thought, I'm gonna see if I can get help. Because normally you don't want to, get help because then it sort of, I felt like I was cheating or something. So I thought I'll call a taxi. I don't know. I can't walk. But of course, they were out of range, and then nobody came by because I was sort of in this very isolated place. And so I just waited, maybe 45 minutes, just laying there in the rain. And then eventually the inflammation came down enough to bend my leg a little, and I carried on. And I don't know what it was about that moment, but it just made me realize like it's not about my leg bending or not, you know? There
Wow.
there are other things inside of me that can help me to keep going.
Yeah. And find it fascinating. Also, you said it was like I didn't realize until later why I kept going. It wasn't about the ending, the goal, right? I think so many times, how many times I've created a goal or said I'm going to do this thing, thinking that I was going to get one thing out of it, and that is never, And then you finish it or you do the thing, and you realize that there's a whole nother experience or lesson or reason behind why I had to finish that thing, and it was not ever the reason that I thought it was.
Yeah, I was so surprised. One of the big things that came up for me was the idea of fun, which seemed, I mean, I judged it even then. I thought, oh, that's irresponsible, But then I realized like my life had become so closed down, so not fun, so not engaging, so
Mhm.
not vibrant. And then yeah, just this idea of giving myself the permission to have fun and to not judge myself by how much work I can do, and all these other things that we use as our markers in life. And so it actually was very empowering. I know that sounds kind of strange as a
No?
sort of
Yeah.
this big epiphany that you should have fun in life, but for me that was actually a really important thing and something beautiful.
Yeah. Well, and this was the precursor to you starting this work as a transformational coach. I mean, it could possibly be that if you hadn't figured out that fun and those different things, that you wouldn't have been open to a whole new path in your world. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what does transformational coaching mean to you? And
Well, I think it really taps into other parts of yourself. So, I mean, in my other work that I do as a consultant, it's always about data and decisions and evidence and all these things. And so I think the transformational piece, the reason I found it so powerful is that you tap into your heart, you tap into your body, into sort of greater wisdom than yourself, right? So you can, people interpret that differently. It can mean nature, it can mean science, it can mean spiritual sort of experiences. And all of those things are places where we get information and that we are connected to, but we often don't interact with them when we're trying to make a decision or think about our lives. And so for me, transformational coaching isn't about telling anybody what to do, or, I'm not handing out advice, but I'm just there as a partner really and supporting that energy shift. And so for me, I see it as really just supporting somebody to allow that energy to flow and find out what's there.
yeah. And so what is your company is called Flourish, right? That's your coaching program. So what do people most often come to you seeking?
Well, so it's sort of two things because on one hand, I work with people who are in sort of, high achievers in leadership roles who are looking for sort of a thinking partner, somebody to support them through the loneliness sometimes, right? People say it's lonely at the top. Well, it's true when you have that much responsibility, sometimes you want to be able to receive support, but also to think about yourself in that, especially for women, because, we're told to be a certain way. And so to find your own style is actually really powerful. That's one side of the work. And then the transformational side is really more about people generally who, something terrible has happened. You are in a great life, but you don't know yourself anymore. Nothing satisfies. So it's a little bit different in terms of who is interested in that kind of transformational coaching, but generally it's people who, for whatever reason, life is just not working as a match for who they are right now. And that transformational piece helps them to go into it much more deeply to really see who's in there.
Mhm.
Who do I want to be? And especially at a certain age, people just want to live, right? They want to live well, they want to live abundantly.
Yeah.
And, we've all followed so many rules in our lives. And I think there's that point where people come to and say, that's not the only thing.
Yeah.
And I really want to understand myself better to really live out the rest of my life in a more beautiful, connected, engaged way.
Yeah. Yeah. What's the difference between living a successful life and living a fulfilled life? Fulfillment, right? The
Yeah.
success is something that I can say I have on paper that, the outside world looks at me and says, oh, she's really successful. And then it's like, and, am I really fulfilled in my life and knowing who I am and seeking the ways that are calling to me and, in my deepest desires. Because a lot of people that are successful have followed the rules. They followed the rules of what was told was going to make them happy. And they wake up one day and they're like, yeah, not so much anymore.
Because there's a time where that stuff works, right? I mean,
Yeah,
I've been through it too.
yeah,
I followed the rules, I did the things, I got all the credentials, and I was happy about that. That felt good for me.
yeah,
So it's not a negation of any of those things. It's
yeah.
just a recognition that there's a point where you've grown into somebody else and you want to find your own life that matches.
Yeah, exactly. Find a life that matches where, because that is, we grow over time. Things shift, things change. We look at things differently. Maybe the kids leave the house, or you go through a divorce, or you move. You have to move, or you've hit the top of the ladder wherever you're at, and you're just like, so I'm here now. Now what, right? and then,
Mhm.
and then how do I find the next thing that's going to awaken me and and find the truth of what is my soul's calling or my heart's desire or that deeper meaning in life. Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, beautiful. I really love you're literally helping people to flourish, to help them to understand that. And so when you're one of the things that you said with the big piece, you were talking about like what are some of the steps. And I want to go back to this idea of surrender because I
Mm.
think that is something for so many people that they're like, yeah, I hear you, but what? How do I really do that? What's the key to surrender, and what does that really look like? So, when you
Yeah.
say surrender, what is that? What would that look like for someone? And how will they know if they actually have surrendered?
Yeah. Well, I'll start off by saying it's not easy. So, I mean, I literally spent the last 2 years every day telling myself to surrender. I put up, affirmations. I did all kinds of rituals. I did all kinds of things, and I did not get there.
Hmm.
So, just bear in mind that surrender is not an easy thing. And people throw it around like it's this great thing, and in theory it is. But, I think as humans, we want to have a certain amount of control because it gives us a sense of safety. And I think that
Yes.
for me was huge because I felt like, well, if I surrender, if I give in, if I accept this, then I've said it's okay,
Mm,
and it's not okay.
yeah.
And so I think you have to come to terms with a very long list of things, and that will maybe be different for different people.
Hmm.
But it can be, and for me anyway, it was especially that sense of control in the sense that, well, if this thing is wrong, then I can't sort of let it go, right? I have to do something. And then there's also, I think, in surrender, a certain looking inside yourself and saying, well, what is this for? What am I kind of not like, why am I fighting?
Hmm.
There's an author from Montreal, Kim Twee, and I saw her years ago. She was at a writing festival, and she talked about she's from Vietnam, and she was talking about the people who were kind of fleeing, and she said the people who were swimming and trying to save themselves were generally the ones that actually didn't make it. She said the people who just kind of floated and just let go were the ones that were carried with the flow.
Yeah,
And that's a very difficult thing to think about because
yeah,
that's life or death, right?
yeah,
And I think in life, we often, in seeing something we don't want it.
yeah.
And so I think the idea of acceptance isn't about accepting the thing you don't want or the thing you don't like. It's about accepting that life is way bigger than what you can see maybe in this moment. And so
Accepting that
that's where
life
I
is
think,
way bigger than what you see in this moment. Yeah.
yeah, so for a lot of people, I think working on your perspective, which also is a big job, that's your whole lifetime of everything that you've been taught, everything you've learned, everything you've become. But just really looking at that and especially the idea, I mean, people also throw around this kind of idea of, oh, it's in your ego. And that's part of it though, right? It is true that you also, I think in the exercise for me is to look at other parts of yourself, not the part of yourself that you want to show to the world, not the part of yourself that you're proud of, not the part of yourself that you're comfortable with. It's all the other parts.
Yeah. I find it profound the story you shared about the escaping from Vietnam. That the idea of like those that were like really trying were the ones that weren't making it. I had a similar experience in 2017. I was in Pokhara, Nepal for the month, and I'm like hiking the mountains, doing that. But I'd also stayed, and I wanted to take a canoe, a boat across to see a golden Buddha and come back. And everybody had people like giving them. And I'm like, I'm an athlete. I don't need anybody to take me. I'm going to go do it by myself, so I'm oaring over there. And the whole way over there, I'm like fighting. And I'm like, just fighting the waves and everything and stuff. And by the time I get there, I'm like, oh, like, and I hike the mountain, go see the golden Buddha. And I'm just kind of like, now I got to go back. And I remember coming back and the same thing. The waves are there, and it's a lake. It's not that bad, but I'm fighting it so hard. I'm going in circles. I'm
Yeah.
not making it anywhere, and I got so upset that I picked up one of the oars and I just like went like that, and I cracked it in half and I broke it. And I was like, well, now what are you going to do with one oar? So I like sitting there with both of the oars, and I'm just like, well, there's nothing I can really do. And it was a moment of surrender for me. There was nothing I could do. And magically, not magically, right? Magically, I floated back to where I needed to go. And I was like, thank you for the lesson, right? I was actually reading at that time The Surrender Experiment by Michael Singer, thinking that I was surrendering in my life, recognizing that I was not surrendering, And
Yes.
then this happened, and I'm like, yeah, sometimes when you let go of control and you surrender, things just go the way they're meant to go, And so it's such a beautiful lesson of like when you said that about the Vietnamese, I'm like, oh my gosh, like, yeah, sometimes we think by controlling it that we're going to get to exactly where we need to go. But it was a lot heck of a harder to do it than if I had just, I say it in the realms of like, the universe organizes the grass so that it grows. Everything is in abundance. There's a multitude. Everything is there. Everything comes in this beautiful. And I think that I have more control than that. Oh no, right?
Yeah, and that's the thing we forget. Like if I were in charge of beating my own heart and taking every breath, I would forget. Like I wouldn't make
Yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
thankfully there are
Thank
other things
goodness
out
those
there
things work
helping us.
automatically. Yeah, good
Yeah.
point. Yeah, we are. Uh, there are things that is beautiful. Like, yeah, we want the goals and the desires and to have those things, but it's like I set that, and then if I allow the magic of the world and the universe to show me the way instead of controlling it, I always say it's like if you have a horse and it has blinders on, it has one focus and I only can see one thing. There's one path. There's only one way to get to the destination, and it could be the longest one because I don't know because I'm not seeing anything else. And then if I take those blinders off, if I allow that to open, then I have all these other options. And that's what the universe is trying to give us, is like all these other options, all these other things. And we're just like, no, my way is the best way. I'm going to hold on tight.
Yeah, and that's what I've spent my career doing, right? Is helping people to plan things, figure out how to get
Yes.
there, figure out how it's going, what they want to change, but always with that vision in mind. And
Right.
so this process is basically the opposite. So for me, it's been very counterintuitive, but also extremely powerful.
Mm.
Because I think one of the other things about transformational coaching that's interesting is in general, we are moving towards, like you said, a goal, right? You see the finish line, that's where you're going. And when you get derailed, you just want to get back on track, right? You want to go back to the path that was there and just follow it. And I think in transformation, you go through this experience of looking inside yourself and finding out, is this actually the path for me? Like,
Mm.
maybe
Mm.
not,
Yeah.
and then you're actually not really orienting yourself to these goals. You're orienting yourself to all of these other bigger things out there in,
Yeah.
in yourself, in the
Yeah.
universe. And like you said, that opens up so many more possibilities that you couldn't even yourself have come up with.
Yeah, because really, in the end, what is the true goal? The true goal is never really the relationship or the home or the thing. It's something greater than that. It's a feeling of peace or a feeling of happiness or joy or love or something that is what's beneath the why of the thing that I want over just the thing that I think that I want. Because that's just the means to the end. What is the actual end? Like you said, you went to Italy. So you were in Italy, the end of the earth. What was the name of the place again? With an
Oh,
F?
Finisterra, yeah.
Finisterra, right. Right. And so there's this thing of like, what is the actual end goal? What is the actual thing? It's actually not. The other things are just points along the way that are leading us to the greater purpose, the greater goal, the greater thing that I want. Yeah. Mm.
Yeah. And yeah, and I fell in love with who I was on the path,
Yeah.
not at the end of the path, you
Oh,
know?
if everyone can fall in love with themselves of who they are on the path, walking the path, then it doesn't even make a difference what the destination is.
Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. Oh my gosh, Sarah, what an incredible conversation we have had today about the Camino Real and transformational coaching and flourish. And before we go, I have a question that I love to ask everyone. This is the High on Life podcast, so I want to know, what does high on life mean to you?
I think high on life means that you give yourself a chance to find out what you're made of and find out what's out there.
Mm,
Because I think it's always more than we think it is.
mm,
And the more open we can be and the more generous we can be to ourselves and to others, the more we get to experience it.
yeah, beautiful. Is there anything else you would like to share with our community today?
No, I am so grateful to be here. And yeah,
So I want you
it's
all to go to the
wonderful
show
to
notes
share this.
below. You'll be able to connect with Sarah and find out more about Flourish and her transformational work. And as soon as we have information about her Camino book, we will also have that there for you. And you can go to below, find out about the Way of the Initiate, Stories of Remembering and Awakening and the New Human, our co-author book that is coming out in September, and our online summit, The Way of the Initiate. Both are down below, and you can check all of those out. Thank you again, Sarah, so much for flourishing us today.
Thank you.